All right, welcome back to Niners Nightly, and with us on the UMA guest line to chop it up and break it down is Brian Peacock, half of Locked On 49ers. Brian, Niners and Saints, and this week they're going to have to get it done without Brock Purdy on the road and with no George Kittle, and suddenly it's amazing how much adversity has struck this team right out of the chute.
It's never dull with the San Francisco 49ers. It's always something, which makes it great to cover the football team. But I imagine the hearts of 49ers fans are probably aging more rapidly than maybe the fans of other teams around the NFL. With everything that's gone on for really a last half a dozen years with quarterback controversies and injuries and having bad seasons and great seasons and losing Super Bowls, it can never just be normal for the San Francisco 49ers. And here we are again already. And we're only 1 week into the 2025 season. I don't know how this thing's going to go in New Orleans. It's not the easiest place to play. And we had talked about on Locked On 49ers that this could be potentially a trap game coming into the year when we were making predictions just a couple of weeks ago. And now it's less like a trap game, more like a game that feels like it's suddenly the 49ers and the Saints are on a level playing field with a lot of unknowns going into week 2.
I would imagine the offensive game plan for the 49ers is going to be a heavy dose of the run to try to support Mac Jones. And without George Kittle, I would imagine they still do have Luke Farrell, who's an excellent run blocker. But I'll tell you, just watching the first week from the Saints, they're not an easy team to run on. They got Breesy from Clemson inside. They got Godshock inside. Granderson's a good pass rusher. Demario Davis has always been a good linebacker. Carl Granderson off the edge is a problem right now. And you got Chase Young, if he's healthy, off the other edge. Cam Jordan is, been playing forever, but he's still playing at a high level. So, this 49er offensive line is going to be challenged by this Saints front for sure.
Cam Jordan and Demario Davis can still play. I absolutely agree there. And so this is not going to be a cakewalk. I don't think that top to bottom, the New Orleans Saints are a great football team, but the 49ers are going to have a challenge, and they're going to have to go in there, beat up, and go win a football game. And they gotta lean on the run game, right? But I don't know how sustainable 31 touches a game is for Christian McCaffrey. That's a 517 touch pace for the season, right? And so a guy that's already got his own injuries, and he said there was more made of his calf injury, and good on Christian McCaffrey if he pulled himself out of practice, and it really wasn't a major injury to avoid that sort of an injury for him with his calf and all the lower leg injuries that he was dealing with last year. He said there's nothing to worry about, but he said that last year too. But if he's feeling good this week after getting the workhorse 31 touches that he got last week, then that's a really good sign for the 49ers. They're going to have to run the ball. They're going to have to run the ball a little bit more efficiently than they did the 3-yard per clip in week 1 against the Seahawks.
What's your assessment of the 49er offensive line? On one hand, Shanahan said, hey, I thought our line played pretty well. But then when you look closer, they struggled to run the ball with McCaffrey. They, averaged 3 yards a carry. Purdy was pressured on 60% of his dropbacks. That's way, way too much pressure. What do you give me your thoughts on the Niner O-line?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, the 49ers defense helped the offense that they didn't have to put up more points in week 1 because it was a struggle for them to run the football. Brock Purdy got pressured too much. And especially with the way that some of the pressures came about with the guy who gave up the most pressures was Trent Williams, and looking a little rusty in week 1. And there were times where he looked like vintage Trent Williams, but you hope that, he's got his legs underneath him a little bit more going into week 2. I think Dominic Poone's probably playing a little bit hurt. And so all that leads to an offensive line that plays pretty, average at best, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think that's what we saw in week 1. They need to create more holes for Christian McCaffrey and Brian Robinson, and they need to protect Mac Jones if he's back there at quarterback, because I think Mac Jones is going to be able to make fewer plays on the move, even though he's maybe more athletic than you would give him credit for. He's not the playmaker on the move that Brock Purdy might be.
How good of a player do you think Mac Jones is? Do you believe that Mac Jones was the guy that Kyle wanted in 2021? He was the 5th of the 5 quarterbacks that went in round 1 in 21. And there was so much talk at the time, even as Shanahan himself was like, I like Trey Lance. There were people who were like, he doesn't mean it. the Mike Lombardis of the world like doubled down. No, he was that was forced upon him. What do you believe as far as the 21 draft?
Well, I think it's pretty clear that Mac Jones wasn't worthy of the number 3 pick in the draft, probably wasn't a first round guy, period. And it is kind of crazy to think that the 49ers might have been willing to move up, to trade up to number 3 to get a guy like Mac Jones. I think he's a really good backup for the 49ers to have right now. I think he's a guy that can come in and spot start for you, and you're going to be okay, which I think the 49ers will be okay with Mac Jones. I think he is a good fit for Kyle Shanahan. I see why he might have liked him as a quarterback. But clearly, he just doesn't have the talent level of someone that you're going to try to draft number 3 and let alone trade up to get and have a franchise altering player. And it's funny because the 49ers, out of the 3 guys that were talked about at the 3rd pick, the guy who was a clear distant 3rd for them in Justin Fields turned out to be the best NFL quarterback. And he had a really good week for the New York Jets in week 1. So I don't know if Fields would have been a great fit for the 49ers and how much better that would have gone than Trey Lance, but what a wild turn of events in 2021. And it's funny because 49ers fans kind of learned to, a lot of 49ers fans learned to kind of hate or at least dislike Mac Jones because a lot of them didn't want Mac Jones as the pick. And so they kind of turned against Mac Jones. And now to see him starting and it's a pretty wild turn of events. I think he's going to be a good player for the 49ers in a backup role. I think he can come in and win some football games. And I think the 49ers are going to win the game. And I think there might be some opportunities for some bigger throws down the field from Mac Jones because he does throw a pretty nice deep ball. I don't know how efficient it's going to be. I don't know if he's going to be able to make those tight window throws on time like Brock Purdy has, but I think he could be a good fit. And I don't think anybody should be shocked if he plays well for Kyle Shanahan.
Supposedly his nickname is the Joker. Did you know that? He's his
Mac Jones?
Yeah, I think supposedly he goes by the Joker.
Okay.
I don't know. I just read that, but I mean, this guy was a 2-time national champion. This guy was first team All SEC. This guy made the Pro Bowl as his rookie year in 2021. I'm looking at his Alabama stats: 16-1 with 56 touchdowns and 7 picks. In 2020 at Bama, he completed 77% of his passes. He goes to the Pro Bowl in 21. McDaniel leaves in 22. They bring in Matt Patricia as the OC. Needless to say, a defensive coach as the OC doesn't necessarily go well. It didn't go well. Then their receiver core just kind of fell apart. Bill O'Brien in 23. They moved him to Jacksonville in 24. He signs with the Niners for 2 years and $7 million. I don't know. I mean, I'll say this: the guy really opened my eyes this summer. He's tough. He knows how to play. He's smart. He sees coverage as well. He's tough. He gets the ball out. He plays on time. Against Denver's killer defense in the joint practice, I thought he outplayed Purdy that day. I thought he played on time and delivered the ball. What are the odds that Mac Jones steps in and just plays great?
I think it's certainly possible. And look, Kyle Shanahan's a phenomenal offensive coordinator. And you've seen guys who are NFL level players be elevated in Kyle Shanahan's offense. And we saw that with Jimmy Garoppolo too, another former New England Patriot. Will we see the same thing with Mac Jones? I think it's certainly entirely possible. I don't want to heap too much expectations on Mac Jones in this game, but I think he'll be fine. I think he's a really good backup quarterback to have. I think he was a smart signing by the 49ers. I don't expect him to outplay and create a quarterback controversy and play so well, but I think he'll be all right for the 49ers in the time being. The thing I worry about is who's he going to be throwing the ball to.
Exactly. And who knows? I mean, it's wide open. Is it going to, be some combination of Gage and Bourne, if Bourne is ready, and JJ, if JJ's healthy, and Pearsall, and it's maybe Watkins, if Watkins can get out there. Won't be Demarcus Robinson for a couple more weeks. Watching the film, the All 22 this morning for the first time, and then watching the game on the TV copy, and you start to see a little bit more of the game within the game. And some of the things that jumped out was the fact that Seattle against the Niners base personnel, they just stayed with their nickel. I was looking at some of the film and the breakdown on that. 58 nickel defense snaps by Seattle in this game. 32 of them against the Niners in either 12 personnel or 21 personnel. So they kind of, just said, hey, we feel like we can physically stand up to their bigger personnel and still play our nickel and still put 5 DBs out there. Do you think that's a trend we may see throughout the year? Or do you think that's just Seattle playing to what McDonald interprets as their personnel?
Yeah, I think Mike McDonald's a really smart defensive mind, and being able to be multiple up front and play big and small at the same time. It's one of the things the 49ers are able to do, and it really negates one of the advantages that Kyle Shanahan has when he has Kyle Juszczyk and he has George Kittle and he has Christian McCaffrey, and you can really run and pass with all of those players, and it puts the defense in a bind. And so if you play your defense the way Kyle Shanahan wants you to play defense against him, it's going to make it easier for Kyle Shanahan. So I think that's if you do have the horses up front to stop the run, and you could play with a nickel defender, and their nickel defenders made a lot of plays in the run and in the backfield. And there was always, Witherspoon and E-Man Worry before he got hurt at the beginning of the game. And there seemed to be always a defender, a defensive back that was near the line of scrimmage that was making a lot of plays for that Seattle Seahawks defense. And I think you'll probably see a lot of teams try to take a page out of that against the 49ers. So that way they still have that nickel personnel on the field when the 49ers are able to call pass plays with a dynamic pass catching running back like Christian McCaffrey.
Last thing I want to get your thoughts on, when you looked at the stat sheet for Mikael Williams, you see how many he played a bunch of snaps. He played a lot inside. There was no tackles. There were no pressures. There were no sacks. There were no hurries. And yet people that said, hey man, I watched the film, I gave him like a B minus. And I'm like, well, okay, I got to go watch it myself. So after watching it a little bit this morning, I'll say this. I don't know if Gross Matos can stay healthy, but Gross Matos and Williams inside in that nickel pass rush line, their NASCAR line, whatever you want to call it, where they basically go 4 defensive ends with Huff and Bosa on the edges and Gross Matos and Mikael inside. That gives the Niners 2 truly dynamic interior guys. And I thought Seattle, even though I liked what I saw from Zabel, I thought they didn't handle it particularly well. To me, that's an exciting combo inside. If Gross Matos can stay healthy and Williams can continue to kind of learn and progress, I think they could be a really exciting inside rush combo.
Yeah, and I was wondering how Robert Saleh would run that defensive unit and rotate the defensive linemen, and he did have a lot of rotations. I think there's still a lot of competition for snaps there. Kalia Davis had some snaps, and he's really the only true 3 technique on the roster. Alfred Collins worked in the second drive, which was probably the worst drive by the 49ers defense, and then CJ West worked in there as well, and Elliott was in there as the starter, and he was in there quite a bit of defensive tackle. And then, I knew Mikael Williams would get some looks inside, but I didn't expect to see Mikael Williams and Yetur Gross-Matos both inside as bigger defensive ends and rushing from the interior at the same time. And then Robert Saleh was also throwing a lot of wrinkles. It was much less static 49ers front than in recent years. And then when Robert Saleh was first here and he was doing some sim pressures and then dropping Yetur Gross-Matos back in coverage a couple times and Mikael Williams back in coverage and then bringing a different blitzer from another place to get numbers and really finding ways to get pressure without just bringing his standard 4 defensive linemen and utilizing those more athletic defensive ends on the interior. So I loved seeing that from Robert Saleh, seeing how good D. Winters is playing. It's clear that Saleh is a linebacker whisperer. That was phenomenal and really felt like a stock up and one big check mark for the 49ers, the way they rotated on the defensive line, the way Robert Saleh has that unit ready to go with so many young players and so many questions about what they were going to look like outside of, Fred Warner and Nick Bosa and Mikael Williams specifically. He didn't win a bunch as a pass rusher or make a bunch of plays in the backfield or anything and had a very empty box score, but he didn't lose either, which is in the run game. He was powerful. He showed leverage, maybe looked a little tentative. I didn't see him trying to throw a lot of moves as a pass rusher either. So maybe there's more growth there. And he was just making sure that he was assignment sound in the run game before anything else in week 1, year 1.
Brian, always good to wrap with you, man. We'll do it again.
Absolutely, Larry. Always a pleasure.
Brian Peacock stopping by. It's Niners Nightly. We've got more straight ahead on The Sports Leader.